George, I'm so happy to get to talk to you. It really is such a blessing to sit with someone who leans into this kind of work and the way that you've really mastered articulating some of the most important fundamental pieces that help us, as you say, unlock, but also to really tap into everything that God put us here to do. I mean, there's a lot of people in the personal development space, but I feel like you've done such an amazing job at finding a unique lane. So thank you for coming on.
Well, you're welcome. It's always been fascinated because I feel like all I did was just show up and, just follow, my passion, and so I'm doing what I was put here to do, and I enjoy doing it. It's amazing. It's fantastic.
Yeah, well,
Opportunity, to be able to do something and serve people and get benefit from it. I can't tell you when people tell me how much whatever I put out there is helping them. I feel great because that's my intention, is to be a service and to be helpful and to share what I got so that people realize that they can do it too. And they can have it. They just had to be willing.
Yeah. And I'm not surprised that you find it so meaningful because it is so needed. And yes, we are all built, just like I say, like every Tesla has the same equipment in it. We all have this capacity, but we don't always know how to tune in. So I want to, before we get into some of the work, I want to know how you were led to this work. Why did you find such a love of studying mindfulness and studying flow, and what led you to
that? People are probably familiar with Joseph Campbell and The Power of Myth. And one of the things he says in The Power of Myth is, he says, where your pain is where your life is. And so the hero's journey, it doesn't start with somebody giving you a lottery ticket or saying you just won, book of the week or the megabucks or anything. It usually starts with some adversity, and the ability to say yes to the adversity and to learn from it is what it's about. So this is about my journey. It started out with substance abuse and chronic pain, but it was really more about how to, like he said, how to lead a human life in a way where you can experience those moments of being fully alive, just fully engaged, fully deployed, and for the highest good, or the greatest good. There's something about, and I was reading it in one of the books, I read a lot of books, and it talked about the altruism, we're wired for that, but there's something, I think it was probably The Art of the Impossible by Stephen Cutler. There's something about saying yes to life, and then our latent abilities come out of that need, out of that difficulty, that challenge. And there's something about it when we access it and we realize, oh man, I can, no matter what happens to me, I get to choose my response. I get to decide who I'm going to be, even if I can't control my circumstances, like Viktor Frankl talked about in a concentration camp, but I can control my mind. I can control what I focus on and how I choose to respond to whatever it is. I can respond with grace and dignity and not lose myself, no matter what.
I mean, that really is it, right? That is like the point of light on the spectrum of all that is where we have free will. What you just said, I've never heard that, although I've heard things like that, but I love how you said, you quoted Joseph Campbell saying, where your pain is, that's where your life is. That makes so much sense. And then when you sort of rattled off the things that you've lived through, I mean, those are such giant challenges. And I get on one level what you're saying, but like the humanity of being in it, in the thicket of all that stuff, and then still being able to rise to where you are. Bring us to that moment in the movie. Like, what's that scene look like when you were able to overcome and choose into a much more healthier, elevated state of being?
Yes. So it's getting to a point, let me see. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that led up to it, but it just came down to is one week, I was active, and when you're addicted to heroin and you're getting high multiple times a day, you're always running a fever. You're always having withdrawal symptoms till you get high and whatnot. And I'm running around, and I was sick, and I went to the doctors, and they told me I had a strep infection, and my temperature was like 105 or something. So I ended up in the hospital for a week. And while I was in the hospital, it was really frustrating because they could see that I was a substance abuser because I had tracks all up and down my arms, and they wouldn't give me any pain medicine, and they had to cut into my arm. And then they made me go 3-4 days without giving me anything. And then when I got ready to leave, they gave me a prescription for Percocet. I mean, it was like, like they have no idea, nothing. And they say, if you keep doing that, you're going to die. But something happened, and I had been going to AA since April, and that was late March. And then April 1st, my friend Danny, who I grew up with, but I used to get high with, he came by my house and took me to an AA meeting on April 1st, 1984. And I saw him, and I was intrigued that, okay, he's a dope fiend like me and an alcoholic, but he's clean. How'd that happen? And so, and I was ready because I had hit one of those that we call the elevator. You were on the penthouse, and you're not quite to the sub basement, but I just had a spiritual bottom where I couldn't stop and I couldn't keep going. And going to AA was actually, and the 12 steps was actually getting to me. And then I got to the point where, I went to AA meetings, and then I got into detox. So that was kind of the moment that I could see that there was a possibility to me. I didn't know what it was, but I knew if he did it, I got to check it out. And so that was one of the moments. But it's interesting because going to those 12-step meetings and whatnot, I continued to drink and do things on the side. I mean, I was just, it was one of those things where I had to get to a point where I could go into detox and not get sick. And so I got into detox, and I remember walking into the detox because it was close to my house. And at that time I had lost my car, and I still had a job. I was lucky I was functional, and I still had a house, but I didn't have much else. And so walking to the detox, and then I could hear myself saying, if the same George that goes in comes out, we got a problem. There's a problem here. You cannot come out the way you went in. You got to come out different. And I don't know how much of that is reading or 12 steps and talking to people about it, but I knew that. And sure enough, when I got out of the detox, it was like I was seeing life on life's terms, without substances, without hiding out in my fantasy world or whatever. I was seeing life on life's terms. And I feel like that's the first time I saw my street, saw my neighborhood.
There's no adequate way of responding to that. But it's extremely powerful. Obviously, it's so brave. And also, this is like what true leadership looks like, because everyone who's listening has their own version.
That's right.
Of creating a character that they play, and then who they really are, and the ways that we are addicted to pleasing, and the ways that we're addicted to functioning by not showing up to life as it is, but creating some other way in which we hold ourselves apart from the truth. I mean, that is universal. And so when we hear someone who's not only able to say it out loud, but then this is years ago. We're talking about, there's been decades of your life where you've
we're talking almost 40 years.
Yeah, almost 40 years of life to have had the courage to look it straight in the face. And since then, take every day with this like honest and present look. It's just like, it's like meeting like Moses or Jesus. It's like levels of like, it doesn't even make any sense, but it does make sense because we are actually wired to be able to be with life as it is. We are just raised in ways where there's so much cortisol and there's so much contrast that we can't, it almost makes sense to like check out of it because it's so toxic when we're approaching life in such a toxic way. But of course, that's never the answer. And so let's talk about it, because you've written books, you've been teaching, you've been working with some of the most amazing human beings. What do you now understand about life that you want other people to understand?
Yes. Well, the first thing is that, and it's interesting because I used to, when I got clean, I was working in this couple of years in this sobriety. I was working at this holistic health center. It was called Interface, and it was in Watertown. So I used to volunteer on the weekends, and they'd had these workshops, and they'd have like a Friday night talk, and then they have a Saturday workshop. And so one of the gentlemen that I had the pleasure of serving was Matthew Fox. And Matthew Fox he was a Dominican priest, and he wrote a book called The Original Blessing. Mm-hmm. And of course, he ended up getting censored, and I think he actually ended up leaving. But he also set up this university in California, someplace that was like, I mean, it was really cool. Here he is up there, Catholic priest, and we're doing Tai Chi on stage and stuff like that. But it's this idea of not realizing that we're so good as a community of having a PhD in pathology. We can tell you when it happened, when it started. We're not so good at catching each other doing something right or focusing on the original blessing, and coming from a place where you realize that you're a wife for success. You have Buddha nature, Christ consciousness, Kuan Yin, divine spark. You have the greatness within you that if you embrace it, access it, it can transform not only your life, but everybody else's life or community. So it's this idea of just getting to that point where, yeah, you're a bad mofo. You know, you wife for success, but you just don't know it. It's like when I was in the 8th grade, this friend of mine, he told me, he said, "Hey man, you're a poet. You know how I know it? Your feet show it, the Longfellows." It's like, so you have Longfellow capability, Emerson, the Bella Amherst, Emily Dickinson. There's so many, we're wired, but it's like you said, you buy a new Tesla and all you want to know is how to start it and how to stop it and how to go someplace, but you're not interested in reading the manual so you can use the full capacity of the vehicle and all the smart technology and whatnot. We tend to say, well, we ain't trying to go there. We just want to get to A and B, and we just need the basic fundamentals, but we don't really want to understand it so we can get the best use out of it. So I'd say our mind-body process, we have a masterpiece that we don't even know we have. And not only that, we're not interested in it. We're interested in what's out here instead of going in here and realizing all you need to succeed is inside. It's always an inside job. So we have this tremendous capacity, potential that can be unlocked. It can be developed, it can be accessed, but it's an inside job. Only you can do it. You can have help and people can encourage us and inspire us and then, give us hints, but we have to do it. And to the degree that we're able to unlock the quality of our life, to be able to live fully and creatively, is going to be enhanced by the ability of how much we develop and access the greatness within. That's what it comes down to. And so for me, everything is fine, it says, I think in the Bible, it talks about those who thirst and hunger after knowledge. They're the ones that get it. The ones that say, I'm straight, I'm cool. You're going to hide out in mediocrity. Or, desperate lives, these, quiet lives of desperation. And Kierkegaard talks about one of the most common forms of despair is not being yourself. So you understand that that's what it's about. And so it's really about making a choice and having people around you and role models, whether it's Joseph Campbell or Maya Angelou or even, I was listening to Louise Hay, and I remember back in the day when she wrote a book, you can heal yourself. People thought it was controversial because she wasn't really saying you were responsible for your illness, but she was saying that you have a role to play in it. And if you play your role, you can heal yourself, but that's too much because that amount of responsibility, because I'd say we have a system of hideouts. We're not interested in being aware and being mindful, because if we are, now we got to be responsible. And if we're responsible, then we can't just blame and deny. We got to say, I'm responsible. I have a role. And here's the amazing thing about it. It's like we put ourselves in jail. We're the jailer. And so because we put ourselves in jail, we can let ourselves out. We can unlock. We locked ourselves up. We can unlock. But unless we accept that and embrace that. Now, why is that so challenging? Well, because you're really, and it's interesting, I have this quote here. So to really embrace that, this is Soren Kierkegaard, 1846. He said, one side of the coin is heads. You know that one. That's freedom, potentiality, choice, your choice, spontaneous choice of one's will. The other side is tails. That's uncertainty, anxiety, unexpectability or unpredictability. And he said that they come together. So, and what he calls it is the alarming possibility of being able. So think about that one. So we're afraid. This is Marianne Williamson when she talked about our greatest fear, that we are great and we can't accept that. We can't handle the truth. we have this, this, and of course there's people around that want to tell you who you ought to be or who you should be or who they think you should be, instead of you being the one that decides. And this includes your parents and everybody, because it's an inside job. You have to know yourself, to be yourself, to express yourself, to share yourself. So it's about, who are you really? Why are you here? You have a uniqueness. And I talk about it in my book. I don't know if I have a copy up here, but I talk about, Joseph Campbell talks about, you have to, the only thing you can offer to the world, it has to come out of your own person, unique potentialities. And so we have school systems and everything that teaches one size, but we know there's multiple intelligences. It's not just, English and science or math, but there's also intelligence or interpersonal, existential, knowing how to read trails. I mean, it's all of this spatial intelligence, all of these different ways that we can celebrate each other. And so we have to understand that it's up to each person to figure out who they are. Now, we tend to react to the extremes, extreme fear, extreme pain or happiness, but the ordinariness of life and the normal things that make everything amazing, we just ignore those. We don't have time for it. So for me, I didn't have a reason to want to do anything differently than what I was doing. So it was only through what I call the AOF, method of motivation, which is ass on fire, that I was able to say, okay, this ain't working, and maybe I should try something else. Because if I keep doing what I'm doing, I'm going to keep getting what I'm getting. And so, but it's challenging. I can't, because you got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Anytime, and this is what Eric Fromm talked about, is that anytime you change a habit, like when you brush your teeth or when you do something, you mobilize anxieties. Once again, that's freedom. That's getting out of it and being unlocked. It mobilizes anxieties. But what we don't know is that if you embrace those anxieties and move through it, you get stronger. You build resilience. And as I forget his name, one of the Nietzsche, that which does not kill me makes me stronger. And so you realize it's through adversity, it's through difficulty that latent abilities express themselves. This is what Hans Selye talked about in his book, The Stress of Life. That when we have the demand, and we know that about the neurochemicals and the brain science, that when you're challenged, you get locked in, and there's something about being in that high state of arousal that if you can have poise with it or intention and purpose with it, and I can, there's something here for me to get. This is a learning process. This is a challenge that I'm up for, and it's going to be an amazing experience. that totally changes the psychology of it versus saying, oh my God, I don't know what this is, I'm screwed. That's a psychology that is focusing on being a victim or not having the power to choose. And so we always have a choice. Even when we're not choosing, we're choosing. And so can we create space between stimulus and response, slow down? And in that space, we have the freedom and power to choose. And why not choose greatness? Why not choose the lovely and things that are positive, goodwill, kindness, compassion, empathy, joy? We can choose those, but those are choices. So we got to look at our thoughts, because we become what we think about. That's The Stranger's Secret. There's a book called The Stranger's Secret. And Louise Hay talks about it a lot. It's like, if you can, we have control of our thoughts, even though we don't think we do. But just like Dr. Dre, when he said, I have my mind on money, money on my mind, that's meditation. So from moment to moment, and I think Dr. Dre was part of that, Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre. But anyway, the point is that we have to be able to observe, what thoughts are we thinking? What do we have on our mind? What do we have our minds on? And that's going to tell us a lot about our experience. Mm-hmm. And so we have to understand the unexamined life is not worth living. We got to examine, how are we thinking? So I talk about this embracing part of our quality of the masterpieces. We have this ability to observe, to step back and observe our experience and reflect on it. We have self-awareness, and then we have self-regulation. What is self-regulation? Self-regulated thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, but also we can choose how we respond to something. So something happens, and we can see it as a blessing or a curse. And depending on how we observe it, if we see it as something to be avoided, that's one psychology. Another psychology is there's an opportunity here. There's something for us to get. And if we don't get it, we're going to keep getting what we're getting. If you don't want to keep getting what you're getting, then you got to change. You got to do something different.
I mean, everything you just said, we should just all have on repeat and listen to it every morning, because you would have such a masterful day if we listened to that every single day and selected those thoughts the way we select our clothes. You said so many things. In order to respond, I'm going to pick one thing out of it, but we really could talk for 19 hours about everything you just said. You said something so powerful about the ordinary moments and how we tend to just not notice that, because we're only really available to slow down and notice the high highs and the low lows. And I know that mindfulness and presence is a big part of your work. And I know that you met Dr. Jon Kabat-Zinn years ago, and the two of you have had lots of amazing collaborations and journeys together. And I can feel it in everything you're saying, that keeps coming back around, being present, that keeps coming back around. And why I love that is because we've done almost 800 episodes of the show, and there are plenty of people who come on with really cool things to say, and it's about achievement. And achievement is one really cool thing to study. But what I find is that there's only so much achievement can actually give you and the world, because ultimately what we really want is the lightness of our own being. We want to arrive at our own door. We want to be there in the moment. And there's so little that we're being taught or directed toward to actually be, and to have equanimity, or to have peace, and to have wonder and wholeness for the regular, for the mundane, extraordinary, ordinary life. And I want to hear about why mindfulness grabbed you in such a way, and what you and Jon Kabat-Zinn did together, and how that has shaped your life, and how that has shaped the work you do, and why that, because that is very unique to you, that it's so obvious, like how much you've absorbed of the wisdom of the world and your own wisdom. Mm-hmm. I mean, the first story is your hero's journey. And then everything else out of your mouth is the combo of, you've taken every good nugget in this world. But in addition to all of that, you in particular you've literally added mindfulness to this work, which not everybody does. So why that? Why is that so gripping to you?
So let me talk about, so when I go back to my book, The Mind for Athletes, Secrets to Pure Performance, I talk about the 5 superpowers. And so I think people, especially in the mindfulness field, they talk about mindfulness like it's this secret sauce or it's by itself, but mindfulness by itself is not enough. It has to be supported by those other superpowers. For instance, you have to have some insight or wisdom. You got to know what you're being mindful of. And then you have to make the effort to be mindful. And make the effort to be mindful, you have to have enough faith to make the effort, right? And so, and you got to understand that sometimes some people have so much faith that they're Pollyanna-ish, and then you have some people that have so much insight or so much knowledge that they become cynical. So you have to balance those two, and mindfulness helps us balance it, where if you're too cynical, you got to bring more faith in. If you have too much faith, then you got to verify it, and you got to bring the evidence and the insight and, you know, and that sort of thing. And when you make the effort, you can make, like me, you can make the wrong effort, try too hard or not try hard enough. It has to be balanced with poise or focus or concentration. And if you're too concentrated and you don't have enough effort, you can get sluggish. So these things, it's about balance, and mindfulness helps cultivate those 5 superpowers, the other 4, including the self, and at the same time, it helps balance them. So when people talk about mindfulness, I'm not sure what they mean. When I talk about mindfulness, I'm talking about mirror mind. I'm talking about this ability to see things in new and fresh ways, like the mirror just reflects what's in front of it. So we have to create this space so that when we observe something, there's a very short period of time where it's just raw data, and then immediately there's the projection of embellishment of self-reference, abstract thinking, okay, this means that, associative thinking, and just I, me, and mine. It's like, if you like it, you embellish it. If you don't like it, then you make it worse than what it is. Instead of just, and then there's also this idea of seeing things and relating to them based on what we already know, instead of seeing them fresh without any interference, but letting the thing speak to us in its own language without interrupting, without pushing it away, pulling it towards us, or interpreting. But it takes a certain amount of vulnerability to just let somebody speak or let things speak to you in its own language without you having an agenda and trying to fit it into. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
It makes sense. We don't see clearly. We have a cognitive bias. We're not really present to it.
That's right. And let's get it even more complicated. So I like to talk about the 2 wolves, the Cherokee grandfather, and I'm gonna, for simplicity, one is fear and one is love. And so we all have this battle that's going on inside of us. This is what the grandfather told his grandson. And one is fear and one is love. And the grandson got concerned. And he said, not only do I have this battle going on inside of me, but everyone, including you, has that battle going on inside of you. And the grandson, which wolf will win? And the grandfather said, the one that I feed.
That's right.
So once again, and so if I have on the fear glasses, then everybody's a threat, a danger. I'm in survival mode, you can't, on a cellular level, you're either in survival mode or growth mode. You can't do both. Like in football, we talk about the best defense is a good offense, because you have the ball and the other team can't get the ball, they can't score. So it's this. And so if we have on the love glasses, then the love glasses, now we have, things are open up. We have the broaden and build theory, which when your mind's at positive, your brain functions more. You have access to your memory and stuff. But when you're in the fear, everything gets locked up. So you don't even have access to your memory, and you get emotionally hijacked. So that the impulse, no stress between stimulus and response, that stimulus goes right to the amygdala. You get emotionally hijacked. So you have to be able to create it, slow things down, and create the space so that your frontal cortex can get involved. Your understanding of, well, what am I doing? What's my intention? Instead of being, reacting where there's no thought and no reflection on where that's going to lead to, and you go back to bad, negative behavior or whatever. But you have to create that space, and in that space, you have the freedom and power to choose, and you can actually slow things down by slowing down how you perceive things and letting things speak to you in its own language without you interpreting what it means. And I don't know if I have, because I used to carry this stuff around, but it talks about this this will or this ability to develop, wisdom begins in wonder. And this wonder is the unwillingness to let things speak to us in his own language.
I mean,
and that's a practice. And so mindfulness is just this ability to observe things uncritically, without judging, without pushing it away, without pulling it towards you, but to let whatever's there speak in its own language.
Yeah.
So you can see it in new and fresh ways. And so mindfulness is by itself is not enough. You need wisdom, you need effort, you need concentration, and you need faith, and you need you got to have some kind of wisdom, which could be a combination of information, rational thought, being a rational thinking, and you want the intuition and a direct experience of it. So it's once you have a direct experience of it, now you get it and you have an experience of it, but it's not to be believed. Yeah, you can believe it, but it's really better to have a direct experience of it so you can speak from an existential point of view. Yeah, that's my experience. I actually experience what it's like when I can just be still and know, when I can just let things speak to me and I see things in new and fresh ways. And sometimes you look at things and you keep seeing the same thing. That's not a problem unless you make it a problem. But it's really powerful.
I mean, it's an amazing deal. And I love how you said a few times that, we have the choice to respond, and that's what it is to be responsible, is you're choosing how you respond, and you can actually slow down enough to see things as they are and not through this projection. And that gives you so much of what life really can give you. And I just wanted to touch on it, and then we'll talk about your more recent book. But this book, The Mindful Athlete, I know that Phil Jackson wrote the foreword of this book, and I wanted to just bring up the actual tangible athletes that you've worked with, because I think it's one thing for us to kind of take everything you're saying and it feels really vague, but it's another thing when we can understand that there's an element to what we've watched. Like if we've watched Michael Jordan, like in his zone, there's an element of that which is mindful. There's an element of that which can be assigned to a practice of mindfulness. Can you talk about how the athletes you've worked with, how it is that Phil Jackson's love of this work, how is it that gives someone who's already talented at basketball, as an example, how does that give them that edge? Why is it related to that game?
Yes, because wisdom begins in wonder, and this idea of being in the zone. So when you are able to be in the moment, the mindfulness makes you flow ready. But being in the
flow ready, I love that.
It makes you flow ready because we know what the triggers of flow are. We know that you have to have high challenges and high skills, and that's that relationship between that. But you have to have clear goals and the ability to observe, a shorter feedback loop. So you see what you're doing, you see what you're getting, and in real time, you're making on the fly adjustments. And so when you could be mindful, you can see things without judging, you're able to see things. And then in the seeing of it, the thing about mindfulness or mirror mind is when you see it, then there's a knowing that what you need to do the next thing. Now, Joseph Campbell talked about an element that's really important, because I talk about flow and being in the zone. And he talks about in the Power of Myth, he talks about when an athlete is at championship form, they're coming out of this place of rest. I call it the eye of the hurricane, you can call it whatever you want. And when they come out of that, when they're in championship form, they're performing out of that, not being driven by fear or desire, but holding their center and then just moving it. So you got to be able, it's almost like if you watch improv, the reason improv works is that when you give me something, I have to accept it and work with it. If I don't accept and work with it, then it won't work.
Yes,
so
and
being in flow is like improv. It's like, okay, this is what's happening. Let me make this adjustment. Let me do this. Let me do that. And what happens is you get to a point where I say, embrace your greatness. Then you find the flow, and you find the flow because it becomes effortless because you know what you're getting. You have a short feedback loop and you're making adjustments in the fly. And then at some point, it's like you catch a wave or you catch the current and it just carries you and you're not there. There's no self-consciousness. You're not worried about how you're doing. You have supreme confidence. And there's a premonition part of it where you see things happening before they happen because you're relating on a spiritual level. You're relating in a way where there's no ego there. The ego is not there. Taking it, you're just noticing, and all the training and everything you've done, it's like you got out of the way so that you can just express yourself honestly. As what Bruce Lee said, that's what martial arts is about, to express yourself honestly. So there's something about coming out of that place of rest where creativity and wisdom just expresses itself. You just know stuff. And then you get creative. You say, okay. And I saw this in real time when I roomed with Dr. J. Of course, he would play like that. But when he played his first semi-pro games, when he signed the contract, and we used to drive down to Portchester, New York, and he'd be playing. And now you got to understand, he played in a college game where he was playing in a set offense, no up and down, and you couldn't dunk in the game. So because of Kareem, they outlawed dunking because they didn't want him to dominate. So they won't tell you that, but that's what happened. And so now he's in there. Now it's like he's unlocked, and he's doing stuff. He's dunking on people. He's doing these moves and everything. And it was me and Al and a couple other people. And I said, man, he's making shit up. I'm seeing it, but in real time. But I've seen the rudiments of what he practiced. But then now the game comes and it's just this knowledge. Okay, do this, do that. And it's like he's creating in the fly. And that's when you're playing at a high level, when you're playing at a spiritual level, because he did all that practice. He's been mindful of that. He understood all that stuff. But then now it expresses itself. So I would say that we learn a lot implicitly or non-declaratively. Yeah. Like when we learn how to ride a bike, you don't even know you have it. But then the situation comes and all of a sudden, all of those practices, all of those skills, you just got to get out of the way. And, there's a quote, Marcus Aurelius. He said, what's in the way becomes the way.
Yeah.
And so that's what it comes down to. So when you're in flow, you got to say yes to whatever's happening and then make your adjustment. But your awareness and your understanding of basic fundamentals and how to express yourself in a certain situation. And just instead of forcing things, it's like, the action, the intention and action are co-arise, and so that they're mirrored, they're married. It's like they're connected. They're not separate. And that's how I tell people, when you see clearly, you behave clearly. So if you want good actions, you got to have good vision. You got to have good images of what that looks like. And you're just going with it. And so, so I saw that, and I've had flow experiences myself. I have a lot now, but it's really more about just understanding that if you can make the feedback loop, if you have clarity about what it is you're doing, what your goals are, and getting immediate feedback and being able to say, okay, this is inconvenient, but I got to say yes to it and then improvise on it, to be creative with it. Okay, how do I use this? And so you do that and you can see it. So there's, even though it looks like they're being all athletic, there's the whole mind, body, and heart. This is what Eric Fromm talks about. His definition of the zone of flow is spontaneity. Being spontaneous. And so to be spontaneous is what he called positive freedom in his book, Escape from Freedom. It's a fully integrated self. So your mind, body, heart, and soul have to be in alignment, and you can't have these conflicts of, me versus we, and, what am I doing? And, am I playing for the love of the game, or if I'm hating on somebody, or like I said, you can't be in survival mode and growth mode at the same time. You got to get out of survival mode into growth mode. And then that's where the creativity comes from, when you can just show up and say yes to it. Okay, we got this. Okay, that's what's happening. Whatever the defense gives you, you take it. They close out on you, you up fake and go by them. If they play off you, you jab step and you shoot. It's nothing personal. It's just, and that's what Phil, that's why mindfulness was so crucial to his philosophy, because his philosophy was player movement, ball movement. Each player had to be able to make plays and all of that. So there was So they were challenged above their skill, above out of their comfort zone. But that's how you grow, and you get comfortable being uncomfortable. And then once you do it and you enjoy it and you get the learning and the achievement, now you have this energizing enthusiasm where you say, okay, let's do more. That's great. That, I'm going to learn more. Oh, this is a challenge. It's going to be awesome. So the rich get richer.
It's amazing. I'm just drinking in every word. My husband for 14 years was a vice president of Fox Sports. And in the beginning of our marriage, he's like, come with me to the All-Star breakfast. And I'm like, I'm not a sports fan. Oh my God, did I become a sports fan? Because I'd go to these breakfasts and Shaq would speak, or, Kareem would speak. And I was like, this is church. This is actually like the most religious thing.
Yes.
Every player was like the most spiritually connected inflow person. And I was like, oh, that's what we're watching. You think they're dribbling. They're not. It's choreography at its finest.
Yes.
It's oneness. It's being something bigger than what you are. It's being part of a team. I was just like blown away. And I wanted to say to you, I mean, I'm curious on a three-dimensional human level, what it was like for you, because initially in your life, I mean, you're an amazing ball player yourself, and then to get injured and to not continue down that road, but to find that God had a different destiny for you. What was that like for you? And how do you see your life now, having been so close to that other journey?
Yes. So I struggled for years because I didn't know who I was. But then once I went into detox and came out of it, and then I got access to that masterpiece within, connecting to higher power. That was huge. I don't want to minimize that. So that's my concept of what God or a higher power is.
Me too.
And then with God, all things are possible. Yeah. And so then it was just a matter of me just listening to myself. Okay, I need to be intellectually stimulated. This is how I can help people. This is how I can be of service. And so I know if I want to keep what I got to give it away. And if I want to learn something, I got to teach it. So I learned that early on. So it was just like, so to me, it was really more about, okay, so this is what I have. I got lemons. I got to make lemonade. Yeah. It's nothing personal, but it's just saying yes to life and then moving with it. And it's really funny because my brother-in-law, he married to my oldest sister, and I remember going over their house one time and I seen all of these pictures of him and Wilt Chamberlain and all these trophies. I said, man, what's going on here? He said, yeah, that's different. We went to high school together. I said, no way. So, and when Wilt used to come, Walt Hazzard, Wally Jones, all of these West Philly guys. So that's where my brother-in-law grew up. But he went in the Air Force. He didn't, continue to play basketball. But we used to have these conversations.
Crazy.
But you think about all the connections. Me, rooming with Dr. J, working with MJ, working with Kobe, working with Melo, working with, some of the football players and some of the, soccer players and all of these elite performers on different levels. It's no accident. It's because what Joseph Campbell talked about, when you follow your bliss, doors will open where there were no doors. You'll end up in places you never thought. I mean, I was in Copenhagen at the President's Summit this summer. It's like, wow, I'm up here with all these amazing people, with all these Europeans, and I got to speak on here, and it was like, okay, it's not like, oh man, kids from Dorchester, how did you do that? It's like, no, dude, the universe will collude.
Oh,
you be yourself,
so
you do who you are, and you end up in places like being with MJ. I mean, I couldn't, being really good friends with Phil, and then meeting Michael Murphy, who created Esalen Institute like 60 years ago, and I'm running into Jay Abraham. I'm meeting all of these amazing.
Oh my God, it's awesome.
And I'm not doing anything but just being myself, and just showing up and showing out, and just sharing. I would say sharing the gospel, the good news.
Oh, it's so good. I'm actually sitting here, and I know I'm just a human in a large sea of a lot of people, but I'm sitting here thinking, you should be president of the United States. That's what I'm literally thinking. Like, you should be the president. That's what I'm thinking. I know that I know that 17.
Yeah. No. You're.
I'm serious.
Yeah. You know, it's kind of funny you say that because I feel like living a principle-centered life can be really helpful for some in a situation where you have all these things coming at you. And it's unfortunate because I remember Mother Teresa died around the same time that Princess Diana got killed. And the focus was on Princess Diana.
Oh, man.
You know, and so I get that. And people look at certain people and you could tell people are on a mission and people are doing things. And this is what Dr. David Hawkins talked about. People don't know the difference between truth and falsehood. And you get to see that. So you look at it and if something happens, then you interpret what it means. And you can interpret things in ways that are not accurate with true north, or just because you don't like somebody or they're not part of your tribe, you deny it, or you have these people on the internet and these media platforms that are saying so many things that are untrue, but they say it enough times that people think they're true. That's why it's always about see for yourself. And like they say in the Bible, you shall know them by their fruit. So what are they doing? Are they taking things away or producing things? And are they inclusive or are they exclusive? Are they being loving or are they being hateful? And we got to be able to distinguish that, because people can talk and say things, but it ain't true. Because I know when I was a substance abuser, man, you had a gift for gab. You say things and you do things, but in the end of the day, you got to keep lying instead of just really being able to say, this is true north. And even though I don't like going through this on this part of the journey, that's the only way. Is always, it's always, the only way is through. Right. You got to go through. Yeah. And so that's what I wish. So yeah, do I have to be president? No, but I wish the president, and I wish people who are supporting the president like us, that we see clearly and we choose the good. We choose inclusion. We choose compassion. We choose love. We choose empathy. We choose to hold each other accountable, and to encourage people to take personal responsibility. That's right. That's what we need. But you can't just say do it without modeling that for him.
Exactly. That's why I just want to say, for the record, anybody who's been sober and has been a part of AA as long as you have, that should be the prerequisite to being president. Because to be a leader, you have to have been down there with the people. Yes. You have to be able to show us a way out. And to me, there is no one who does that better than somebody who's walked the path to sobriety, especially in the 12-step program, where you have a higher power that you are responsible toward. And to me, that is the making of leadership. But before we get off, I have to you've already blown everybody away. So obviously we're going to put a link to your newest book, Unlocked, but I just want to touch on it, even though we've been talking about it, right? We've been talking about finding flow, but let's just talk about it. Sometimes people are going to sit here. This is the biggest thing that I hear. Okay. People are going to sit here. They're going to listen to you. They're going to say, he's amazing. He's phenomenal. That's for sure. Got that. Got it. Done. But what people have that's insidious is this belief that that's because you're amazing and they're not enough. They're going to come to you and they're going to say, I have all the evidence to show you. There's nowhere in the same sentence you could put me and Michael Jordan. He was given something that I don't have. I don't have that capacity. People think they're not worthy of it because they're an imposter. This is what people walk around with. It's riddling people. It's a bigger pandemic than the pandemic, right?
That's right.
So what do you say to people to allow them to know that there is a flow that exists for them, and then help them to stay in it and not get drowned by that darkness inside?
Yes, you have to embrace your greatness within you. You have to get beyond all of that noise and clutter that tells you that it's out here and not here, because part of that is our theory, the original, like curse, like instead of the original blessing, and realizing that we have this ability, we really do have this ability to access the greatness within us, but we're afraid of it because what I talked about, the dizziness of freedom, of the ability, the allowing a possibility of being able, because now you can't, I think a lot of it has to do, people play the B and D. You know what the B and D is? Blame and denial.
Oh.
They don't take responsibility. I am responsible. You know, I'm my own greatest teacher. Be responsible. I can learn anything I want to learn. And true understanding comes from reflecting on experience. Those 4 steps to knowing yourself, right? If you talk about it that way. And so we have to be willing to say, God is not out there in some other time. And just like Jesus said, heaven is here, but men do not see it. So I read somewhere where they talked about you don't go to heaven, you grow to heaven. Mm. So what does it mean? It means, and I'll share this, maybe I'll end with this. So I did 2 podcasts. One was the School Greatness with Lewis Howes, and the other one was with Tim Ferriss. And they both asked me something to the effect, what 3 things do I know or whatever? And I didn't realize it till afterwards that I said the same thing both times. And what I said was, the only time we have is now. The only one you could be is you. And all you need is love. Oh. So don't take my word for it. You say, yeah, but no. It's like, see if it's true. So it's not like you had to be like MJ, but you have to unlock like in your own way. But that's a common denominator. Those folks are unlocked. So you can unlock, and I tell you how to do it in the book. Embrace your greatness. Find the flow, discover success. But it's got to come out. It's got to start with this idea that this is a friendly universe and there's a lawfulness to it. So it's not who you are personally. It's your principle-centered life. It's these qualities of being real. Just knowing the only time you have is now. So you got to do shit now. You can't wait till tomorrow or yesterday. It's now is the time. Now, right now is pregnant with possibility. And I'll tell you something else is profound. Right now, there's nothing wrong. Right now, there's nothing wrong. And so, and it's pregnant with possibility. What do you want to do? Do you want to get down, give up on it? You know, it's like the song, but the songs tell you this stuff. You know, you got to be willing, but you got to have a sense of urgency. You got to be pursuing excellence of wisdom or have your ass on fire before you realize that what I'm doing, if I keep doing what I'm doing, I'm going to keep getting what I'm getting. If I want excellence, if I have a life that I want to live into, then am I willing to be who I need to be to do what I need to do? And so it's time to step up. As Vin Diesel says, don't get up if you can't keep up. Right? And that's the thing. You can keep up, but that's a choice. As a choice, can you embrace your greatness? And that's the challenge, because there's all this noise about greatness, but it ain't got nothing to do with what's really happening. It's just noise. And you can listen to that, or you can listen to what I'm offering you and then check it out and see if it's true.
It's amazing. It was such a gift. I feel like it was like Christmas, to like every word was a present, and you're awesome. Tell everybody, we're going to put the link in the show notes, but tell everybody where they can get the book, where they can follow you. And
yeah, they can go to my website and all of that stuff. And I have At Home with George. I don't know if I have your text information or whatever, but I do it At Home with George every Thursday.
You're so smart. I mean, to say the very least, and we're so blessed to have you in our world. And this was such a gift.
Well, thank you. I just want people to use their minds and realize I and the other one, we're all in this together. And so we have to help each other. And so when we focus too much on the me and don't think about the we, that's problematic. That then we become selfish and we just get in, instead of saying, how can I help? And when and the reason I do this is because by me sharing my experience and strength and hope, it's going to empower others to do the same. And if we can get the ripple where everybody is, so that's how we're going to transform.
That's it.
By transforming our hearts and minds.
That's it. Together. We got to do it together, or else we're not doing it at all.
So I appreciate you for what you're doing and allowing me to be on here. And I have to say, you created quite a listening for me to express myself.
Well, you're just such a delight. You're just all love, and it was powerful to be around love like that.